Shalom, giving all praise to Yahweh, Shalom, 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 Kakada, Shalom to the 144,000, rest of you elect out there, Shalom to you all. Anyway, you said the suckers is fair use, fair use, fair use. And I'm going to entitle this video, Everyone in the U.S. military will be microchipped first. So listen to this, right here. You get diseases from that chip too. Anyway, listen to this.
Hey, hear me out. I'm a veteran, right? When we join the military and basic training, they give us hella shots. We have to stand in the line and you walk through the line while you get shot probably like 7 times on each side. I don't know. Whatever VA is literally just the place where you go for them to track the bullshit that they gave us. I only say that because when I got out the military, this lady called me from some institute or something. I don't remember because it was about 10 years ago when she called me and she was like, they're doing a study on autoimmune disease. Do I wish to participate? And I was at the time, I was like, bitch, I don't got no autoimmune disease. I ain't got no autoimmune disease. And she sounded shocked.
Yes, you do. After them shots, that develops autoimmune disease.
That I didn't know that I had autoimmune disease. Anyway, fast forward 10 years later, a bitch got fibromyalgia.
Fibromyalgia is autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks itself. That's from the shots you've been getting. Ultimately, the 4 branches of the military will all get shot before they go, the Northern Army, before they go, pursuant to Joel 2, verse 20. That's all I got to say.
Fibromyalgia, that's how I feel. Like, the military is just a big ass experiment, and they use this building right here to kind of track us, to see what's happening inside our bodies from the bullshit that they get with. Still to this day, I don't know what was in that from the bullshit. To kind of track that experiment, how I feel. Like, the military is just a big ass experiment, and they use this building. That's how I feel. Like, the military is just a big ass experiment.
The military is just a biggest experiment.
And they use this building right here to kind of track us.
Track you.
To see what's happening inside our bodies from the bullshit that they get with.
Ultimately, they're going to give you the microchip, the mark of the beast. Revelation 13 and 16.
Still to this day, I don't know what was in that concoction and shots.
Because they don't tell you and you're stupid enough to go. There's a lot of our women that's in the military, man. Fuck them women. They ain't gonna make it.
There's no some people got really sick. Some people got autoimmune disease.
Fibromyalgia is another way of saying autoimmune disease. When you look up fibromyalgia, that's back in the 50s, that wasn't such a word. Autoimmune disease, when you hear that back in the 60s and 70s. Fibromyalgia is autoimmune disease where your immune system, which is supposed to fight foreign invaders in the form of parasites and so forth, viruses, bacteria. But instead of doing that, it attacks your own body. It attacks itself, and that's what you get for getting all those shots in you. And they ain't gonna wake up. They're gonna line up before you go to the Middle East, before you go to the land of Havilah, Saudi Arabia, in that area between the Euphrates and the Red Sea behind you. Every last one of you are gonna have a microchip in you, and you're gonna die over there in all that place over there. You're gonna be a permanent fixture of the Middle East.
So you know, in TikTok, this is just a hypothetical question. There's no fact base. It's just.
So that's all I wanted to play. Anyway, Shalom, on to the next.
Alright, and Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash. Double honors the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth and sincerity, and a shout out to the Akims out there on the 4 corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Brakah the Yahweh, Brakah the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, Brakatum. War abroad should not mean less freedom at home. So they're going to clamp down on what you're free to say, free speech, all that shit that you thought was constitutional. Well, you can see a lot of unconstitutional shit. As an American, a mother, and a rancher, I've been reflecting on what it means when our country enters another war and what history tells us often follows home. There will be endless debate about who is right and who is wrong. Some will praise the leaders, because they follow Trump wherever he goeth, and they worship him. Others will criticize him. Well, obviously. And neighbors will disagree about how we got here and how events will unfold in the future. Those conversations are natural in a so-called free society. They at least give you the illusion that you're free. But there's another conversation that deserves just as much attention. One history quietly asks every time the U.S. goes to war, what freedoms will Americans lose this time? Because you had the NDAA Act that came out. You also had, Bush came out with one before that, after the 9/11 attacks. And that was the beginning of a whole bunch of things. I forgot what that one was, but I remember the NDAA, which is the one that was like trumped up. You can just imagine what's going on, right? During World War I, Congress passed the Espionage Act of 1917, followed by the Sedition Act of 1918. Under these laws, Americans would be arrested and imprisoned simply for criticizing the war or discouraging military enlistment. The war eventually ended, but the Espionage Act remains on the books more than a century later. So, you had a bunch of camps open up in World War II, as you know. So, pretty much so, they're just questioning, well, let history teach. And you know as well as I do that they've also changed the rules about selective service as this goes into. We've got to reiterate. It's sometimes good to reiterate, and this is from another news clip. So, reiterating what Apostle Tahar has been saying for years, man, that they're going to institute a draft, and they're going to make it, all, both young and old are going to be drafted, because if you were in the military before, well, they're going to draft you too, you say you're retired or whatever, they're going to pull up retirees as well. Because they're already deploying troops over there. You already know about the 2,500 Marines that were just deployed. And he already had 100,000 as we speak anyways.
Well, military draft rules have changed just in time for the war in Iran.
We told you.
What exactly has happened? Here's the story from Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a measure to automatically register men for the Selective Service, updating requirements for the first time in decades. Oh, wow. Just as we're in war now, to be fair, they did pass this in December. So this was in the December NDAA.
There's the NDAA.
The rule change goes into effect this coming December 2026. So starting in December 2026, all males aged 18 to 25 years old, or really 26, will be automatically registered for selective service. Now, proponents of this say this will just make things easier. Don't you understand? This just makes things easier. Because before, young men had to remember to register, and if they didn't, it was a felony, and although they never got prosecuted. But this will just speed things up and make things easier. It's just easier for them. That's what this is. And others say, yeah, right. You guys are just wanting to make sure that we've got a military
and that everybody's
that you can throw at an enemy and sacrifice their lives so that you guys can continue siphoning off resources, making a gob of money, and you just need young poor men to go on the front lines. Okay, let's talk about how exactly this draft rule, what this has done. So before this coming December, the way it worked was there was no mandatory. It is mandatory to register for the selective service, but you had to go and physically do it. Essentially, you had to either register online or you had to mail it in at the post office. There were ways that young men between 18 and 25 years old could register for selective service. You're mandated if you're an American citizen to register for selective service within 30 days of your 18th birthday. Anyone who arrives in this country between the ages of 18 and 26 must register within 30 days of arriving to the country if they're in that age range. So who has to do this? It's all male U.S. citizens and all male immigrants in that age bracket. And that includes, when they say immigrants, that's all immigrants. They're not just talking about legal ones. They're saying illegal immigrants, we don't care, you have to register for selective service. Could you imagine? I wonder how many illegal immigrants cross the border and say, well, now I got to follow the law and sign up for selective service so I can fight in the war. Asylum seekers also have to, refugees, permanent residents, everybody in that age range who's male, except, I wonder how it works if you identify as female. Maybe you could get out of it that way. There might be a ton of sudden trans males coming up, like we might see a lot of young men turning female pretty quickly. So don't be shocked if we see skyrocketing rates of trans males, trans women. But there was a narrow group of exceptions, and one of those being, if you're a diplomat's kid, like I think Netanyahu's son doesn't have to do anything except sit on the beach and drink a bunch of mojitos, right, while they watch everybody in their country back in Israel have to go to war. Okay, so what Congress did was they then said, now we're going to make it just automatic registration. Previously, you'd have to go and physically do it in some way. And then if there was a draft, then it would be run on a lottery system. And they would basically do it by birthday. They would have all the birthdays of the year, and then they would correlate those birthdays with certain numbers, and then they would draw a number out of the lottery, and that number corresponded with a set of birthdays, and those young men were called up for service, and that was automatic. They received induction notices. They had to go to war. When this happened in Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, it was pretty much right away. They didn't wait until they ran out of soldiers. They didn't wait until, we all the ones that volunteered are dead, so now we got to turn to the draft. No, it happens pretty quickly, so don't think, well, we'll wait and see, and once we see a bunch of American soldiers dying in Iran, then they're going to do the draft. No, they might do the draft on us pretty quickly. They might actually make it happen faster.
Yep.
And Trump will make it well, I would say that the Trump supporters will say, he's just doing it to scare Iran because we want to show them that we can assemble a giant military. But don't be fooled. A lot of young men, before Vietnam, before they were sent off to Vietnam, when they received their induction notices, a lot of them did a lot of pretty extreme things in order to avoid being shipped off to war. My dad was telling me about some of the things that some of his friends did. Like one guy paid a friend to hit his leg with a sledgehammer. Another looked at a bright light. I think it was, like at where they're looking at really bright lights. It's not the sun, but something else.
Expect suicide to go up too.
And tried to make himself go blind in order to avoid service. So people do some pretty extreme things in order to avoid being sent off to war. And a person should not have to choose between their life or life imprisonment because their government, the oligarchs, the corrupt, greedy, money-making warmongers in Washington want to use them for cannon fodder. It should be a personal decision.
But you can see that personal choice. You have no choice, Hey, man, that went away long ago. But like everything else, though, well, I'm already starting to see some depletions here. Fears of food shock rise as midterms loom. Yeah, so-called bullshit election is coming up too. It's not just oil. The Iran war is threatening to reignite food inflation. The price-shocked voters feel most directly at the worst possible time for President Trump and Republicans. The Strait of Hormuz paralyzed potential mines carries a third of the world's fertilizer for many American farmers. The spring planting season is just weeks away. On the threat level, the American Farm Bureau Federation warned in a letter to Trump this week that supply chain shocks are expected to drive already record high input prices even higher. Gulf states now menaced by war produce nearly 49% of the world's urea, a critical solid nitrogen fertilizer, and about 30% of its ammonia, according to AFBF. The U.S. also gets 97% of its potassium from foreign sources, plus 18% of its nitrogen and 13% of its phosphate. Fertilizer is not an option to farmers. It's a critical input that determines the crop yield and ultimately the food supply for the American people. It's not a farm issue. It's a food security issue and economic issue for the entire country, Duvall added. When farmers face supply shortages or price increases, those impact ripple through the entire food chain. So it's happening. And the fact that they're reporting on it tells you it's been happening for a while. Because remember, once it's on the news, it's already been happening. They're just now breaking it to you. So naturally, you're having rants, you're having uproars, it's those just doing little videos, but you're beginning to see a little bit of it, and it's going to get worse because a lot of people are not going to want to send their kids to die, and just seeing them being pulled up, going door to door, taking them. A lot of people are going to be taking them, they're going to be chipped. Well, this is just the beginning of it. We're in the beginning of sorrows, because they know it's coming. It's like the old Creedence song, I see a bad moon rising, and it's And that song was all about people being marched off to fight for Vietnam. Well, this one's a much bigger conflict because, as you know, World War III, and most people know that Russia will be involved in this, will go nuclear. A lot of people know that. So this is just a little bit of the rants.
As you may have heard, the Trump administration has gone to Congress to request more money for this war against the horrible regime of Iran, right? And during this hearing, what they disclosed is they have so far spent $11.3 billion on this war in the first 6 days. Now, this does not include pre-war buildup, and it also does not include their losses or anything like this, which again have been billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. Not to mention that the fallout from Iran decimating the United States, like military bases gone, billion-dollar radar stations destroyed, and the biggest thing, honestly, is it has destroyed any kind of partnership that the United States had with these Gulf Coast countries, and not just them, but has now cast doubt on every other area where the United States has a U.S. military base and pledges, we are going to give you security in exchange for this. Now, you also may not know this, but because we have these military bases all over, this gives us the ability for many other things which are now gone. Trade deals, rare earth findings and collections, everything is now disrupted. Basically what Iran has done is decolonized the Middle East. That's really what has happened. And it doesn't really matter what else happens in this war. Iran has decolonized the Middle East to a large degree and is already starting to decolonize everywhere else that the United States is in charge. The power of the United States has been destroyed. The idea that the United States is this overwhelming military force that can provide safety and security by allowing them to use a military base in your country is gone. This is shredded. The credibility is absolutely and completely shredded. This will change everything. And we don't even realize how powerful this really is and what it's going to do to the United States and its power and its credibility. For example, you've all heard of BRICS, right? This is going to influence BRICS, right? And the United States is so against BRICS because it's going to ruin the petrodollar, right? Which they make so much money off of, right? They get a share of everything, just like that. That is going to be gone. That is going to be gone because of this. It's going to influence everything. And so not only has the United States spent $11.3 billion of your tax money, it's only going to get worse from here. Exponentially worse.
Yep, because like everything else, though, it's going to usher in, you know what, and anybody in the military is going to be chipped. Airport chaos worsens ahead of spring break rush as TSA workers miss second paycheck amid government shutdown with monster lines seen at Austin Terminal. Yeah, that's still going on, by the way. I was touching on this before the war broke out, that you still had a partial government shutdown, which basically means Homeland being shut down. Airport chaos to intensify as Transportation Security Administration workers missed their second paycheck amid the partial government shutdown. Passengers across the country reported waits of up to 4 hours as they wade through the disruption caused by the political gridlock over the spending at the Department of Homeland Security. Because remember, the argument was over ISIS, and how much control ISIS has, So, there was arguments over that. Travelers began spilling outside the airport terminal by 0430 hours, just an hour and a half into TSA opening for its first passengers. They braved the chilly 47-degree Fahrenheit temperatures while waiting to make their way through the dense line under the cover of the moon. Video shot by KX journalists. By 0730, the lines had alleviated, allowing all waiting passengers to fit the terminal, which was still packed and slow. So, you can see that right there, how long it is. Okay, I would just fucking start driving. I know there's some places you can't get to, but come on, this is chaotic. Or you know what? Fuck them. You have no reason to go there. Cancel that shit. It comes as around 50,000 TSA workers who are housed under DHS are going without their second paycheck due to the partial shutdown. See, Trump can't even run the fucking country, but he's going to tell everybody else how to run theirs. I was always getting that, right? Because that's what it is. Babylon the Great can't stay out of everybody else's business, but they can't even run their own. Do not trust the illusion of the U.S. superpower. Iranian military warns regional states, and they've proven it. They've proven that the U.S. only cares about the Israeli state and not them. They do care about their assets there, but that's about it, aka their bases. Spokesman for the Iranian armed forces called on leaders of the Muslim countries not to put their trust in the illusion of the U.S. superpower and unite against hypocrisy led by the U.S. and the Israeli state. Do not trust the so-called power of the U.S. Americans can't even defend their own faltering army, let alone the security of Muslim countries and the region, Brigadier General said on Saturday. He also stated that Iranian armed forces disabled the U.S. warship USS Lincoln, whose name once caused fear and facilitated the plundering of Muslim resources and forced it to retreat in a historical defeat. The general said Iran is well capable of reconstructing schools, houses, state buildings, supermarkets, and public infrastructure damaged and destroyed in the U.S.-Israeli onslaught, meaning that they can fix theirs. What are they going to do? Because the U.S. ain't going to fix any infrastructure that was caught in the crossfire of this. So, like everything else, though, ground troops have already been deployed, it's confirmed, as this video goes in. It's a short little video, but it's happening all over the world.
Now they're talking about mining the string. Okay, so we're going to talk about all that today, but we first have to talk about the shortages that we here in North America aren't experiencing, but this is happening all over the world, and this is going to put major demand pressure on the oil and gasoline and diesel supply, never mind the fertilizer and all the other petrochemicals that come out of this region. It's going to have a major negative knock-on effect. Now,
So, like everything else, though, unfortunately it's cut off, but that's all I have on that. I wish I knew what channel he was, but you get a lot of stuff on the social media, Slovakia. He doesn't have a YouTube channel. I tried to look for it. Alright, so this is also coming from Press TV, which obviously you can't get it on most of the platforms. And the only way to really see Press TV is to watch it live on Rumble. And they do have an Odysee channel. You're not going to catch this on YouTube because that's run by the Zionists themselves. But nonetheless, though, this is what's going on, from Press TV.
For his part, Iran's foreign minister has once again called for the condemnation of the U.S.-Israeli aggression against the country by both regional and international organizations. Abbas Araghchi was speaking in a phone call with his Indian counterpart, Subrahmanyam Jaishankar. He briefed the Indian foreign minister on the latest U.S.-Israeli crimes in their ongoing war of aggression against Iran and their impact on regional and international stability and security. Araghchi stressed that the BRICS group of nations, in which both Iran and India are members, can play a constructive role at this juncture in support of the stability and security of the region and the world. Iran's top diplomat also reaffirmed the strong determination of the Iranian government, armed forces, and people for using their legitimate rights to self-defense against aggressors.
So, like everything else, though, you won't catch that on the mainstream. Iranian envoy signals safe passage for India's ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran's ambassador in New Delhi confirmed access to the key oil choke point for India's ships, citing long-standing ties. Responding to a question from RT India's correspondent, the envoy highlighted that Tehran sees New Delhi as a friend and that there are converging interests between the two countries. Well, yeah, they're both BRICS members because, the I is in BRICS, but like everything else, though, Iran's also a permanent member of BRICS. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, handling a substantial share of global oil and gas shipments. This disruption to traffic through the narrow waterway since the U.S. and Israeli state launched their terror attacks against Iran and already had immediate implications for energy markets globally, including for India, which relies heavily on crude supplies passing through the region. Earlier this week, the first India-bound oil tanker sailing under a Liberian flag cleared the Strait of Hormuz and berthed at Mumbai. The Iran's envoy remarks comes hours after top officials of the two countries held telephone talks. India's Prime Minister Modi spoke with Iranian President Pezeshkian on Thursday, expressing concern over the escalation of tensions, the loss of civilian lives, and the damage to civilian infrastructure. So, like everything else, though, they were free to go, as this video goes into.
Hello and welcome. You're watching RT India. I am Osama Shab, live from New Delhi. Our top focus remains the escalating situation in West Asia. And in what could be a significant development for India's energy security, the Iranian ambassador, he has confirmed to RT India that New Delhi will be given safe passage for supplies transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, for more details on this, we have RT India correspondent Vinayak Dikshit. Vinayak, it is potentially a pivotal development. Take us through the details of your conversation.
Yes, so this is definitely a development that India will share. Iran has indicated that safe passage will be provided to Indian energy carrying vessels through the vital Strait of Hormuz, easing tensions of supply disruptions amid the escalating conflict in West Asia.
Yes, you can see the future, and I think that after 2 or 3 hours, yeah. Because we believe that.
Boy, this is going to put Trump's panties in a bunch.
Our friends.
This comes a day after Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a telephonic conversation with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, where he stressed the importance of uninterrupted energy flows and the safety of shipping routes that are vital to India.
Had a conversation with Iranian President Dr. Masoud Pezeshkian to discuss the Syria situation in the region, expressed deep concern over the escalation of tensions and the loss of civilian lives, as well as damage to civilian infrastructure. The safety and security of Indian nationals, along with the need for unhindered transit of goods and energy, remain India's top priorities. Reiterated India's commitment to peace and stability, and urged for dialogue and diplomacy.
Supply disruptions as a result of this conflict have caused long queues outside distribution centers of cooking gas here in India. Though the government maintains that there is adequate supply, there have been fears of an impending shortage of this very vital commodity. Now, with Iran saying that it will allow safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, the situation could further ease, especially since the Russian supplies too are headed to Indian refineries as well.
All right, Vinayak Dikshit, thank you very much for getting us all those details in.
So that's mostly going to hurt the U.S. and their continued terror attacks, you know, because again, you know, well, now you can look at the structural damage in Tehran as this scene goes through.
And as the bombardment continues, Iranian air defenses have been very active in the skies above Tehran overnight. As the war enters its 14th day, Iranian emergency services are working around the clock to search for survivors amid the rubble of destroyed buildings. And in order to understand the impact on civilian life, we went to a residential area where a US-Israeli attack claimed the lives of at least 40 people.
I'm now in one of the places that was hit by American-Israeli attacks a few days ago. These are all residential buildings that have been destroyed. On the other side, there was an administrative building next to these buildings. It's not clear what it was, but apparently that was the target. But next to it, several missiles hit these residential buildings. Even if you turn around, the buildings that were on this side have also been completely destroyed and damaged. The current situation of the buildings here, the place is all destroyed. On the other side, I was told that nearly 40 bodies have been found so far. The exact number of casualties is still unknown and could rise further. The biggest destruction was in this section. It was fully destroyed, with the highest number of casualties here, and you can see how it has been damaged, and many bodies were recovered from here. Here's one of the damaged houses.
This is terrorism.
People brought their belongings out and arranged them here. These are the remaining items that they're left with, to be taken away. This is the situation inside the house.
The U.S. and Israeli state can only target civilians.
This part you see is now here. Next to it, there was another building that was completely destroyed.
You know who the terrorists are.
Building. Here you can almost see the condition of the apartments inside. This is the entrance to the house. The people locked their homes and went away, and their belongings are scattered here. This is another apartment where we can see how it has been destroyed. It's practically uninhabitable. Here's the entrance to the stairs of one of the damaged houses. You can see it's in a terrible state. Everything's destroyed, glass scattered everywhere. I'm seeing houses here that have almost nothing left of them. You can see even the back houses here are damaged. There's no news from its residents so far. We would go up to higher floors if we could, but it's not possible to go any higher. We can see the situation of the other side from here.
Well, and like everything else, the U.S. and Israeli state continue to destroy civilian infrastructure because they only go after civilians. They're not going after military targets. They are deliberately targeting civilian infrastructures, and especially schools. They love shooting schools and hospitals because they're good at it. Killing is their business. And it's very good. It's going to make Trump and those in D.C. a lot of money. 5 Air Force refueling planes struck in Iranian missile attack against Saudi Arabia base. 5 U.S. Air Force refueling planes were struck and damaged on the ground at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Over 3 million people forcibly displaced by U.S.-Israeli war against Iran. Iran reportedly approved India's government sending 2 liquefied petroleum tankers through the Hormuz. Japan-based USS Tripoli and its attached Marines headed towards West Asia. Wall Street Journal says Pentagon sends Marine Expeditionary Unit to West Asia. Oil jumps higher. Pentagon confirms 2 additional deaths in Thursday's downing of the KC-135 refueling tanker aircraft over western Iraq. All 6 U.S. crew members are terminated. Trump and Pentagon claim that the U.S. and Israeli state are totally destroying Iran as the war enters day 14, as we enter into day 15 now. With Trump warning Tehran to watch what happens, and I am killing them, and what a great honor it is to do so. So there you go. He's enjoying destroying their infrastructure and killing civilians. So like everything else, so that's just what they're officially saying. You know that it's a lot worse, as this also goes into, because Press TV, like I said, they took it off of YouTube a long time ago.
The official has dismissed the latest remarks by U.S. President Donald Trump, who claimed that he's looking for rapid victory in the ongoing war of aggression against Iran. The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council made the remark in a social media post. Ali Larijani said, "While starting a war is easy, it cannot be won with a few tweets." He stressed that despite brutal U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, the Iranian nation will not stop until it makes Trump feel sorry for this grave miscalculation. Iran's top security...
So, like everything else, it's a huge miscalculation, and it's very costly. So, it's been reported, as Scott Ritter has been reporting, that Trump is trying to call Putin to try to get some sort of agreement to end the war. So, take a look at that on the Jimmy Dore Show. And you won't hear about this on mainstream media. That's why it's good to look at the alternative media. Because, like everything else, though, Trump is talking hell of shit, saying that they're winning the war. But really, he's trying to call Putin to come to an end, as Scott Ritter goes into.
He called Vladimir Putin. Putin didn't call him. He called Vladimir Putin because Trump is in a bind. And again, the key takeaway from this is that Dmitry is meeting with Witkoff right now. That is a huge thing because that means that the United States is desperate for a deal.
Welcome. We have special guest with us, Scott Ritter here. Everybody knows him. One-time Marine intelligence officer, served in the former Soviet Union implementing arms control agreements. And from 91 to 98, he served as the chief inspector for the United States in Iraq. So welcome back to the show, Scott Ritter. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Are you not depressed? I was just telling you before we went to air that I'm feeling a little depressed about World War III that has started in the Middle East for absolutely over Israel. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm maniacally depressed, but hopeful.
Are you?
I'm hopeful, and this may sound unpatriotic to some people, but I'm hopeful that the United States is on the verge of a strategic defeat of massive proportions, one that will be behavior altering in the end. I think Donald Trump is in a very big bind. I think he's bitten off far more than the United States.
He's been chewing on his own foot for a while.
Looking for an off ramp. I'm hopeful that Vladimir Putin is the mature, pragmatic, patient leader that he appears to be, and will be able to help Trump find a way out of this without us going down the path of World War III.
But it's inevitable.
As an American, I think it's good for our country to finally realize that we can no longer sustain this, the global hegemony that we've been doing so ignorantly for the last several decades, and that we need to right size who we are globally. We need to become good neighbors, not bullies. So this is the hope. It might be a pipe dream. People might accuse me of picking up a mushroom and eating one that I shouldn't have eaten or something like that. But I'm actually not as depressed as I was yesterday, because I had sort of one of these what do they call that moment when you have an epiphany?
I think a light bulb moment.
I had a light bulb. I had a Peter. I was Peter in the Damascus desert, and the light went off, and I saw the light. And I actually think that the Russians are the right people at the right time for this problem set. And I just see a lot of maturity there, a lot of pragmatism, a lot of realism, and they're just positioned to actually help end both the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in Iran. It may take a couple weeks, but I think that we are in such big trouble right now that I don't think Donald Trump realizes just how big a trouble he is. But once he does, Kirill Dmitriev is meeting with Witkoff right now in Miami. A week ago, Kirill Dmitriev had no, everybody hated him. They accused him of traitor. He was a traitor. He's betraying. How dare you work with But because Putin didn't fire him, because everybody's questioning, why does Putin still have Kirill Dmitriev? Why does he fire him? Because you keep the diplomacy door open. And now at this moment, Dmitriev's meeting with Witkoff because they're trying to cut a deal that involves bringing an end to the conflict in Ukraine and an end to the conflict in Iran. And I'm trusting that this is going to lead us in a good direction. Not because Donald Trump's clever, because Vladimir Putin is clever.
So, who is the negotiator that Putin has negotiating with Witkoff? What's his name? I haven't heard his name.
Kirill Dmitriev. He's a former Goldman Sachs banker. I mean, he's a Russian, but he's American trained. And he knows capitalism very well. He runs a Russian national investment fund. But he's a guy that when Steve Witkoff first went over, Putin needed somebody who spoke Witkoff's language. You don't take Sergei Lavrov and have him sit down with Steve Witkoff, because Witkoff doesn't speak diplomacy and Lavrov doesn't speak banker. So you brought in Kirill Dmitriev, and they both spoke the same language. They hit it off well. They get along good. And he's the guy that helped make Alaska happen. And now he might be the guy that helps bring it into these wars. I was very down on Kirill Dmitriev last week. If you had talked to me about him last week, I wasn't going to say too much positive. But this week, I've just seen the Russians do things that just show absolute maturity. It shows patience. It shows the pragmatism. And now Dmitriev's in Miami meeting with Witkoff, and that's a good thing if you want peace.
And so So you think Russia is trying to bring a swift end to this war in the Gulf? Do you think that they have? Tell me what their interest is and what is their leverage?
Their leverage is they're the only thing that's keeping the American economy up right now. Why do you think Donald Trump lifted all the oil sanctions against the Russians yesterday?
Oh, I didn't know he did that. Why did he do that?
Because no oil's leaving the Middle East right now. And so you need oil to come in on the market. So Donald Trump lifted all oil sanctions, and Vladimir Putin's economic problems have been solved. And everybody who was critical on Vladimir Putin didn't understand that he was waiting for just this moment. And now, instead of selling the Euro-grade oil at $23 a barrel discounted, he's now selling it to the Indians at $81 a barrel at full price, making a lot of money in the process. All the Asian purchasers of energy who used to purchase energy from the Middle East can't, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So Putin is literally diverting all of his resources down there, opening up, securing those markets. He's in a solid position. And right now, Trump had taken some pretty hardline stances on Ukraine that he's no longer in a position to hold on to. He needs Russia's help in Iran. And so the Russians are going to say, we go back to the Alaska formula, updated with the most recent information. You have to get the Ukrainians to do this. And in exchange for that, we'll get the Iranians to moderate their demands. But I think the United States is going to have to leave the Middle East. I mean, that's one of the things. It's just a guarantee. We're not staying there. The Iranians are going to make the same argument the Russians always made, that you can't end this war without solving the root cause of the conflict. Because that's what the Russians have said. You can't end the Ukraine conflict and leave unresolved the root causes of the conflict, why we had this conflict. Because if you end it without solving those, we'll just have a conflict in 5 years. So Russia's saying, when this thing ends, it's over, finished. And the Iranians are going to be saying the same thing. When this thing ends, it's over, it's finished. And the only way it can be over and finished is America's got to leave the Middle East. And I think there's a grand bargain to be had out there. This allows Donald Trump to call himself the greatest peacemaker in the history of all time because he's going to end 2 wars.
You think he's going to do that?
And then he'll also tell the American people that I've ended the permanent Middle East conflict. I got the American troops out of the Middle East. Now, smart people know that he got his ass kicked and had to retreat. But, to the true believers, there's a deal here in the making. Who knows how it's going to be finalized, but there's something in the works right now. Dmitriev's meeting with Witkoff. This is a huge thing. That's happening. Witkoff is both the Middle East negotiator, the one who was negotiating with the Iranians, and he's the guy who negotiated with Putin and Dmitriev. So the fact that Dmitriev is meeting with the guy responsible for managing both of the big problems that Trump has right now means that there's a solution being worked out that links both of these problems together.
Well, it's all wishful thinking, but also keep this one in mind. When they shall say peace and safety, then come the sudden destruction. The Israeli state is not going to go along with this, even if Trump were to magically get this deal to go. The Israeli state, will never agree to it anyways. It's a pipe dream, pretty much. But that's what's happening, though, is he's begging Putin to come up with some sort of resolve for it. And there's rumor going around that part of the deal is that the enriched uranium would actually go to Russia. That Iran would send the depleted uranium into Russia, as part of the deal. So that's still, if the deal even exists. U.S. to deploy more Marines warships to Gulf as Iran targets Qatar with missiles. And like everything else, so they're only going after bases. They're not attacking, residential neighborhoods. Sometimes they get caught in the conflict, but they are attacking U.S. interests there. The U.S. is sending Marines and warships into the Gulf as Iran launches missile attacks on Qatar, signaling further escalation into the war. Again, they're going after military targets and assets, but also keep in mind, though, that, the U.S. has officially attacked that island that he threatened to. We'll get into that in a minute. But nonetheless, the U.S. is deploying thousands of Marines and additional warships to West Asia as Iran intensifies attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. It signals that the current war is expanding. On Friday, the U.S. Department of War approved the deployment after a request from U.S. Central Command. U.S. Secretary of War Hegseth approved sending several warships and around 5,000 Marines and sailors, according to 3 U.S. officials who spoke to the newspaper. So, thousands of Marines and several warships and F-35 fighter jets to support terrorists already operating in the region. So, like everything else, the Marine Expeditionary Unit would carry out ground operations if ordered to do so. So, like everything else, it's looking like there's an impending ground invasion. And again, they're reiterating, because it's on almost all of them. Hegseth says Gulf states going on an offensive against Iran. He's even doubling down, saying that, all these other countries have declared war against Iran. Really? I don't see Qatar, even that one, sending their own troops over there to fight. Only the U.S. is launching this war of aggression. Saudi Arabia hasn't sent their troops over there to fight. Neither has Turkey or any of them others. U.S. Secretary of War Hegseth said the Gulf countries are going on the offensive and argued that the U.S. war on Iran is going in D.C.'s favor. The only thing that is widening our advantage, not to mention Gulf allies stepping up even more now, going on the offensive, Hegseth said at a press conference. Yeah, basically you could use their bases, that's about it. And even so, the U.S. is only protecting the Israeli interests, not their interests. Trump warns of possible strikes against Karg oil hub as U.S. tanker reportedly ablaze near Hormuz. So, retaliation, then the U.S. is going to retaliate. You see how this is going, right? U.S. President Trump threatened to order strikes against Iran's main oil export hub on Karg Island unless Tehran halts attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, raising fears of deeper shock to global energy supplies. Well, they have every right to close it down and to target anything else, but it's already happened, it looks like. Trump crossed Iran's red line by heavy bombing Karg Island. They've already bombed it. President Trump on Friday evening Notably, after the U.S. market closure announced that U.S. Central Command carried out major bombing raid against Karg Island, which handles upwards of 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. Importantly, Iran has previously warned that attack against the island would cross a red line and precipitate Iranian attacks on energy infrastructure up and down the Persian Gulf. So it's already happening. This escalation's already happened. Iran warns it will target orders of U.S. missile launchers in United Arab Emirates cities. They're going after those launchers that the U.S. is putting in residential neighborhoods. So guess what? There's going to be more deaths because the U.S. is putting people in harm's way because these people are retarded enough to still have a deal with the U.S. And it's going to fuck them. It's going to fuck them hard. Spokesman for Iran's central headquarters has announced that the country considers its legitimate right to target the origins of U.S. missile launchers located in several Emirati cities. We warn the United Arab Emirates leadership that the Islamic Republic of Iran views it as its legitimate right to strike the origins of the American missile launchers, those concealed in ports, docks, and shelters used by U.S. terrorists under the cover of Emirati cities in defense of its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So here it is.
بسم الله قاسم الجبارين فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم واتقوا الله واعلموا ان الله مع المتقین. اخطار به رژیم متجاوز و شکست خورده آمریکا در پاسخ به اظهارات رئیس جمهور متجاوز و تروریست آمریکا اعلام می‌داریم در صورت حمله به زیرساخت‌های نفتی، اقتصادی و انرژی جمهوری اسلامی ایران همانطور که قبلا اخطار داده بودیم بلا فاصله کلیه زیرساخت‌های نفتی، اقتصادی و انرژی متعلق به شرکت‌های نفتی در سراسر منطقه که دارای سهام آمریکایی میباشند و یا با آمریکا همکاری میکنند نابود و به تلی از خاکستر تبدیل خواهند شد. ان الله عزیز ذو انتقام.
So there it is, eye for an eye, and they are going to be targeting fuel supplies because the U.S. Trump ain't backing down from this, and it's looking like the ground invasion is impending. Trump says the U.S. is ahead of schedule in Iran war, claims most of the missiles are destroyed. We'll see. What a fucking liar. U.S. President Trump said the U.S. is way ahead of schedule in the war against Iran and claimed that nearly 90% of Tehran's missiles have been destroyed. So only 10% of them are left. We're going to be hitting them very hard over the next week, he said, adding that Iran has been damaged so badly that it would take years for them to ever rebuild. Ask about reporters that the Iranian government is not likely to collapse soon, he said. I think it's a very big hurdle. It'll happen, but maybe not immediately. So, like everything else, though, you know, the war continues. And so he's sending thousands of ground troops in there. As Stu Peters' network gets into, play this, and then I'm going to close this out. So, thousands of ground troops are already being deployed. And I know about the 100,000 already. Subbing for Stu Peters, as you know, this guy usually, he's the second one in charge of Stu Peters' network. But reporting on the fact that the active duty has already been deployed there. They're now just releasing this. But 100,000 were deployed last week, but they're now just telling you this, so now they got to telling you it.
As we finish out the week with the Friday broadcast, Stu is getting some well-deserved R&R. We're going to be holding down the fort for him tonight through next Thursday. But look, just because we're going into the weekend, it doesn't mean that we have any deficit of news. You know, it used to be on a Friday, there would be like a few stories that would trickle out, nothing really major. You'd always have to be scrolling through the little links down at the bottom of the screen or flipping through the back pages of the newspaper, looking for the stories that were being let out by the White House, by Congress, by the state government, stuff that they don't want you to see. TV, stuff that they try to just hide way down in the weeds on a Friday when everybody's punching out for the weekend and they're just not really all too concerned with it. And so if you wanted to find anything big, if you wanted to see what was going to be popping the next week, you really had to look for it. But now we are just in a constant full frontal assault of information coming at us 24/7 around the clock, especially now that yet another war for Israel has kicked off in the Middle East, especially now that we are being warned by the corporate media, by the federal government of potential attacks here on American soil. They want this to spill over onto American soil. They have already allowed for it. They have already facilitated it spilling over onto American soil. We will talk about that a little bit later here this evening. But truly, going into this weekend, this is the type of weekend where you can put your phone down, you can turn off the TV, you step outside, throw the ball, cut the grass, whatever you're going to do. And by the time you come back in, you pick up your phone, you turn on the TV, you've got a news alert coming across the screen, and it's telling you that thousands of American troops have been deployed to the Middle East. I mean, that's really the type of weekend that we're looking at here, and it's already happening. 2,500 Marines have already been ordered to deploy to the Middle East. This is a special expeditionary force that is being sent out of roughly 2,500 Marines. So now, I guess, instead of saying, we're at war, they're trying to pull away from that term. They don't want to say we're at war because, of course, there was no declaration of war. All of this is illegal, and that kind of lets the mask off. That kind of lets the guard down a little bit. So they're looking for something else to call this, a special military operation, just an operation in general, an intervention. Well, hey, now they can call it an expedition. It's an expedition in Iran. We're sending in an expeditionary force. We're sending them to the Middle East. Now, it's unclear exactly where this contingent of roughly 2,500 Marines is going to go. Will they drop them right into Iran? It wouldn't surprise me, right? It wouldn't surprise me. And of course, that would be a suicide mission. You drop 2,500 Americans into a country of 90 million people. But that's what these people running our government want. That's what these people in control of the war machine want. They want some kind of pretext, some kind of hideous pretext that they can point to, and they can say, look, thousands of dead Americans. Now we've got to go into Iran with everything we've got. Never mind how they died in the first place. Never mind who put them in the position to be killed, to be sacrificed in the first place. Now we've got to go full force, full scale ground invasion into Iran. So moving 2,500 Marines into the Middle East on top of the thousands of troops who are already there serving as cannon fodder. But again, this is an expeditionary unit, they're calling it. What does that mean? What does expeditionary unit mean? That means you're going to be going out on an expedition out in front of the rest of the crowd. Where's the expedition going to be? Is the expedition to Iran? Is the expedition to the border regions of Iraq butted up against Iran? Where guess what? Americans were killed yesterday. U.S. Central Command has officially confirmed, they've officially announced the deaths of 6 more Americans. These were crew members aboard a U.S. KC-135 refueling aircraft that went down in western Iraq yesterday. Now, look, there's a lot of reports out there saying this was no accident. The U.S. government, of course, they are pitching this as an accident. Of course, they are pitching this as just some kind of grave mistake. They'll investigate it. They'll give us some kind of propaganda answer, just like they're doing with the double tap strike on the girls' school. We're supposed to rely on the investigation, heavy air quotes around investigation, that the Department of War embarks on and then regurgitates to the American people, regurgitates propaganda to the American people, not their actual findings, if there are any, if they're even bothering to investigate it in the first place. It's all a joke. It's all a ruse. And whatever kind of cause for these deaths that they give us, it's suspect. These are the same people who are telling us they're looking into the double tap strike. It wasn't America. Oh, it might have been America, but it was an accident. It's all lies. Why wouldn't they feed us lies about the deaths of these crew members when their plane went down? Because there's reports from other parts of the world saying that this plane was shot down, saying that this plane was brought down by militia groups in Iraq who are loyal to the Iranian cause, who are loyal to getting the United States and getting Israel the hell out of their territory, who are loyal to fighting back against the territorial expansion of Greater Israel, because that's what this is all about. These Americans who died yesterday, their deaths, they came in service to the Talmudic cabal, to the Greater Israel ambitions that are being served by our occupied government, by the people who sent them in there in the first place. They were sacrificed. Every American who was sent in there to die is being sacrificed by these people. This is a blood sacrifice. Commanding officers of the U.S. military admit there's a Talmudic, prophetic, religious component to this, and Benjamin Netanyahu admits it, and will actually hammer down on one of his latest statements surrounding all of that here in just a few moments. But first, speaking of the people who are sending Americans in to die, and by the way, there's a whole lot of indications out there, a whole lot of reporting out there, not just that this plane may have been shot down, but that many more Americans than the 6 on the plane and the 7 that they admit to have been killed in the Middle East while serving as cannon fodder, while serving as a sacrifice for this war for Greater Israel. I don't believe anything that these people tell us at this point, because they put their foreign loyalties on full display. They put their allegiances on full display. Especially Pete Hegseth. This guy has a press conference at this point just about every day. He is putting all of his actor training over at Fox News to very good use. He was a Mockingbird media actor for years, and now he's an actor in the U.S. government, the occupied U.S. government, as he goes out there and he acts out the role of the Secretary of War. That's what he likes to call himself. The Secretary of War for Israel is more like it. This guy's not commanding troops. This guy's not drafting battle plans. This guy's carrying out orders for Israel. He's using Americans. He's sending Americans to their deaths on behalf of Israel. And he made that abundantly clear. You know, he goes on these little diatribes. He talks in sound bites at these press conferences because he wants clippable sound bites that can be used on social media as propaganda. They can be spun into little propaganda clips and put out on TikTok. They can put them out on the Department of War account. They can put them out on the White House account. They can put them out on the Israel account. Across whatever platforms they want. They can have their bot farms, kick them all up, and there you've got your Pete Hegseth soundbite from the press conference. So as he's talking in sound bites, as Americans are being sent to their deaths, and he's acting out his part as the so-called Secretary of War, he once again reminded us all of who he's loyal to, of what cause he's loyal to, of what country he thinks about when he goes to bed at night, and that country is Israel.
The least the flock, right? And they made a song about him because he loves the tweets, he loves the attention. Pete Hegseth, fucking douche. Those guys at South Park did not go easy on him when they did their comedy. But nonetheless, though, you know, you can see that it's happening. You're seeing the gathering of the nations into that valley. The valley of Jehoshaphat. The day of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, is near in the valley of decision. And we're seeing it in real time. Those that are enlisted will be chipped to go fight the war. You know, to go, not just support the war, but to fight the war. You know, to fight in there. Joel chapter 3, and verse 2. I will gather all the nations, bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. You know, and you already know that. And here we are. Verse 9, proclaim this among the Gentiles, which are all the heathen nations, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spear. Let the weak say, I am strong. Iran is speaking very strongly and about how to end this war totally. You know, and what it's going to take to end the war. And, you know, Trump is trying to turn tails like, well, can we go back to the negotiating table? Well, I tried to negotiate with them, but they didn't want a deal. No, they don't want to be attacked ever again. But they have to be able to be ensured that they'll never be attacked again. And so he's begging Putin to come up with something. You know, they won't tell you that on the mainstream. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put you in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for the wickedness is great. You know, that's talking about Esau, the Edomites, Amalek especially. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, is near in the valley of decision. So, you know, we know that World War III is here, and we know that they're going to usher in the MOTB, all in the making, you know. And so while I don't see a ceasefire happening, I believe that the ground invasion is imminent. It's imminent that they're going to try to do that. They might just sacrifice those 2,500 Marines first, just to at least get things breaking in. To try to fucking break in their door and come into Iran and invade. And it's going to be an onslaught. A lot of these terrorists are going to get killed. So, hopefully this has all been edifying. For that I want to say, Brak of the Yahweh, Brak of the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Rekakadash, Wa Abab Babal. Brakathum, Jehofolek, Shalom.